Greetings and salutations, good friends. So it's been a little over a week now, and not so long ago I got to see the new Star Trek movie. And I have to say, for starters, that was a pretty bitchin' movie. I mean, just across the board, man. I mean, that was just a movie that was just incredibly and thoroughly enjoyable on multiple levels. One of which would have to be the first and foremost would be the interactions between all the cast members and all that. I read in an article somewhere that one of the things they were aiming for was to have certain cast members interact, or rather, characters interact in this movie where they got little to zero screen appearances or dialogue, whatever, in the previous films. I thought that was a really cool idea. So all in all, that was definitely a good movie. Yeah, the villain was a little bit of a disappointment in some respects in terms of motivation, master plan, how he lived as long as he did, why he looked the way he did. I will say, for the record, spoilers, if you haven't figured that out already. First of all, the character being played by Idris, terrible with names like that, so I do apologize, but nonetheless, that guy is freaking awesome. Any movie he officially is in now is awesome, just because he's in it. He's just one of those guys now, thankfully. But nonetheless, this guy plays a character named Crawl, and almost everything about him is a big mystery that they don't really answer. Like, they mention how he got to that planet. So I guess they crashed or something because they go through a nebula, which they kind of mention. It's like they mention it and, like, you blink your eye and you miss it. So, like, wait, who, where, why, and how? Oh, wait, Star Trek, and there's science-y stuff, so who cares? On top of that, okay, so he's the captain of some ship, right? And they crash. And then they discover some people on the planet, and then he finds out that they find a way to elongate their lives. Never explained how. More importantly, never exactly explained how he's able to do that through his hands. Is it the suit he's wearing? Is it in his body now? What? How? Why? My fiance asked me the question of, like, okay, so if he started out as human, why did he end up looking the way he did? I have two possible theories on this one. One, he looked the way he did, which, for the record, freaking awesome design. The makeup and all that just looked incredible on him. I've always been a big fan of special effects makeup like that, and this is definitely no exception. But one theory of mine is that he looks that way because, like, a weird side effect of him draining people's life. But then, of course, that gets kind of counterbalanced as the film goes on. He drains more life, and then his appearance changes to be more humanistic, which leads me to my second theory, and the more likely one to my first one. It comes down to simply this. He looked that way because those were the beings he was draining from to begin with. Because as the more humans, or rather Enterprise crew members he drains, the more human he looks. So then my thinking is, again, this is never explained. I mean, granted, I've only seen the movie only once, but it was never explained exactly why he looked that way. So my thinking is he kept draining the life of the individuals on the planet that he crashed on, and by draining their lives, he gained their appearance. And I believe this theory does hold some water when the alien who shows up at the very beginning of the movie, who takes them to the nebula, she and Crawl's beginning state of the movie look very, very similar. So my thinking is that it's like her species. He's draining her species' life, and then he becomes looking like them. Because as the film goes on, especially at the end, he looks very, very human-like. So that's just my thinking. But again, they don't explain where he gets it, how he finds it, and then, of course, how he finds out about this doomsday weapon. I mean, everything about the villain is just really thrown up in the air. You're just supposed to accept it. Like, okay, this is a bad guy. He wants to destroy the Federation. He wants to destroy this one space station because it's full of people. because what was it? He got wronged by the Federation, or he felt abandoned by him, or something. I don't know. Another Zemo situation. I mean, like, motivation was pretty clear, but execution, I guess you could say, didn't make much sense to me. But, all in all, though, still an awesome movie, still worth seeing again and again. And, of course, like everyone else, the Beastie Boys sabotage scene was... I'm being very PC as much as I can here, or PG, was awesome. It was awesome. On a personal level, I like the fact that they actually used that song in the movie, because it was used in quite a few of the trailers and TV spots and all that. So I'm just happy they actually used it. It wasn't just trailer fuel, because sometimes there have been, like, the Suicide Squad trailers, for example, they've used Ballroom Blitz and what was that other one? Some new revision of You Don't Own Me, which pretty bitchin' version for the record, at least for the trailer. By itself, who knows? And, Bohemian Rhapsody. Wonderful, awesome songs, but it almost seemed like they're just using those songs for the trailers, which is kind of a bummer. I do hope they use them in more than just, like, in a background. Like, they just throw it on the jukebox or something in that bar that they keep showing in the trailers. So, I don't know. I'm just glad they used it in Star Trek, because it's a fun song, and it was well used, and that whole sequence was just incredible. But everything else on that, for the record, was really cool. The effects were awesome, the action was awesome, the chemistry, way everyone was playing off each other, was awesome, and then, of course, the send-off. The send-off and tip of the hat, whatever you want to call it, to Leonard Nimoy and Ambassador Spock was pretty damn awesome. Just plain and simple. Then, of course, at the very, very end, they're in loving memory to Leonard Nimoy and Anton. I'm honestly happy that they were able to include that in there before the movie came out. I was hoping they would. I mean, as tragic as his death was, I can tell it hurt even more when you hear about it, and then you see the movie and you see how much of a big part he had in that movie. And for the record, I had not seen Into Darkness, and the mediocre reviews I've heard on it, I can't say I want to see it, but maybe I will now, just to see what the other adventures that they've gone on now. But he had such a big role in that movie that I can tell his loss will be very much felt. And the fact that J.J. Abrams has gone on record now, I mean, who knows? I mean, people change their opinions on these sorts of things all the time. But at the moment, he is saying that he will not recast Chekhov. Like, Chekhov was his role to play, and no one else can do it. So I just hope if they do anything, that they don't just write him out, like, quickly. Like, you gotta give this man his due. Like, you can't just have, like, oh, Chekhov's coming in on the shuttlecraft, and oh no, the shuttlecraft exploded, Chekhov's dead, oh my god. It needs more than that. So, bullet point, awesome movie, confusing story, impressive special effects, makeup, acting, everything. Just everything about this movie is a lot of fun. So, do go out and see it. Strongly recommend it. You won't regret it. But now comes to part 2 of this little video of mine. And it's kind of started out in the very beginning of the movie, because of course with a big movie like this, you gotta show some awesome trailers. And one of the trailers they showed was for Rogue One. And oh my god, that movie looks awesome. I mean, I'm just happy that it's it's wholly original, I guess you could say, pulling from elements of at least A New Hope in terms of it happens just before it. It's how they find the plans for it, for the Death Star, its full completion, and all that. And that got me thinking about a couple of things. One, are they going to do anything about Darth Vader? I wonder. I mean, because technically at this point, he is definitely no longer Anakin Skywalker. By this point, in theory, he has gone throughout the galaxy as far as he can to eliminate every and all Jedi. So, I mean, he's Darth Vader. He is the man. Like, this is like just before his first appearance in A New Hope. So are they going to bring him in? I hope they do. And then, of course, that takes me further back. And this is my point. Oh, I hope they don't do anything to mention the prequels. Oh, I hope they leave the prequels out of this. They did pretty good in The Force Awakens. I hope they continue that. I really hope they do. And then, even further back, this is the rabbit hole right here. Oh, Jake Lloyd. Oh, Jake Lloyd. For those of you who don't know, Jake Lloyd played very, very young Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader in the very, very first Episode 1 prequel, whatever you want to call it. And man, that poor boy has been slammed. Well, man, now. I mean, it's been a few years. He's grown up by now. I mean, you don't just stay frozen in that look forever. Obviously, he's human, so he grew up. And in many respects, I feel sorry for the guy. I really do. And it took something like this. It took actually a combination of thinking about that and then being reminded of this new Jungle Book movie that came out. Because after I saw it, for the record, I thought it was good. It was fun. I liked the changes they made with it. And the kid was awesome. I couldn't begin to pronounce his name. Clearly, I've made that point that I can't do those kinds of names. But for a first-time acting kid, he was really good. I mean, you could tell it was his first time, no question. But it was still really good, and he's definitely got a lot of potential to do better. Now, I'm talking to my fiance about him, like, oh, yeah, I mean, he wasn't great, but he definitely, did really good. And she turns to me like, why do you give him this kind of talk? Like, I can't remember her exact words, but basically asking why I criticize him so harshly. And it comes from a personal level. I've always had an issue with child actors. I mean, I don't think I'm alone in that, but that's just kind of how I am. But then I get reminded about certain movies like Super 8. It has a bunch of child actors in it, and they're all really good. I mean, really good. And it's hard to say, are they so good because they were directed so well, they're just that good of actors, or the adults were downplayed to make the kids look better. And I can't really remember the adults all that much because they weren't the focus. The focus was on the children, as well it should have been. Because it was about them. It was about their story to discover this alien, why it's there, and if they can help it or run away from it. And they were all really good actors. Now, this comes back to Jake Lloyd here. He himself, maybe at that point, was this Mowgli. Because, I mean, for the record, he was only really in one other movie that was noticeable before Episode 1. And that was Jingle All the Way. You can't criticize a kid for his performance in a movie like that. The only reason that movie wasn't a TV-based movie was because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's it. Everyone else in that movie, yeah, it clearly could have been a made-for-TV movie, but for whatever reason, they decided to bump it up and put it in theaters. And for his performance in that, he just had to play a kid. Nothing wrong there. So they chose to put him in Star Wars Episode 1. And no, he didn't do the greatest. But then this is the line that I personally find it difficult to see or cross. When does an actor's performance stop being theirs and being the director's direction, really? Because, I mean, as it's been said, actors put a lot of faith in their directors to give the performance the director wants. And that's what people really keep forgetting. Granted, a performer can be really, really good and go and surpass what the director wanted. Like, they could do a really good performance and the director said, yes, that's what I wanted. But it was totally them. Like Heath Ledger, for example, for the Joker and The Dark Knight. From what I've heard, a lot of that came from him. Not a lot of input from Nolan. There very well could have been, but a lot of that was him. So where does that line get drawn for someone like Jake Lloyd? Jake Lloyd was a child actor. And child actors are known to not being the greatest, but that's just because they're kids. They're still learning. They're still learning, basic math, science, and history and all this stuff that everyone else had to learn at that age. So they're trying to learn that and how to act well. That's a lot of pressure. And so this is what it comes down to for me. It's not all his fault. I don't know. I mean, I've checked his IMDb before I did this video just to make sure I knew exactly. And that poor boy only did one movie after that. After that, it was a bunch of voice-related work for Star Wars Episode 1 stuff. All Phantom Menace-related stuff. And then after that, gone. His last thing he did was back in 2002. And that's it. And I can't help but feel part of this comes down to his performance in Star Wars Episode 1. And more importantly, people's reaction to him. People blame him for his performance and think of him as terrible. And then he probably never got hired again because of that. Like studios and all that thought, well, you weren't all that good and that people didn't like you all that much, so we're not going to bank on you anymore. And that's pretty messed up. I mean, Hayden Christensen has still gotten a bunch of roles, but from what I've heard, he's actually really good. If nothing else, he's gotten better since his role as older Anakin / Darth Vader. And from what I've heard, he's actually really good, and that's kind of my point. It comes down to direction. The kids in Super 8 were really good because J.J. Abrams was able to direct them and show them how to be good. So, this is what I'm advocating for right now. Granted, it's been many, many years. I mean, I myself was barely getting out of middle school when that movie came out. And for me, I was too young to really not like it for the reasons everyone else did. And I'll be honest, I didn't have a problem with Jar Jar at that time. I was young. I mean, like I said, 8th grade. And I thought he was there for good reason. But everyone else clearly said something different. And of course, as I got older, yeah, I found him irritatingly annoying. So I had no problems with them slowly being cut out of the movies. But as far as Jake Lloyd goes, I do feel sorry for the guy. So, like I said, it's kind of a few too many years late for this. But I think it's definitely time to let it go. Let his performance go. And just be another one of those people who blame George Lucas for everything about those movies. Valid, though. Very, very valid. Because people do forget that he did not direct Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. Each of those movies had their own directors. He directed A New Hope, and you can kind of tell. He may have written every single one of those 6 movies. But he directed 4 out of 6. And people tend to forget that sometimes. And boy, oh boy, if you really stop to think about it, it's very noticeable. Now, I'm not exactly sure where the line, of course, there gets drawn for his stuff. Where his stuff got good and bad and all that. I mean, I've heard good things about American Graffiti. I heard that was a really good movie. I still haven't seen that yet, but it looks really good. A lot of really good actors. Based in the 50s. I thought that was a really cool era, style-wise. But that's a different tangent for a different time. But, quick recap. Star Trek, Beyond, awesome movie. Star Wars Rogue One looks really, really damn good. Of course, then Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 also looked really good from their trailers. And we know how that turned out. And then, of course, lay off the Jake Lloyd hate. Guy don't deserve it no more. Like I said, no one probably cares anymore. But I think, and if you're watching this, Jake, I forgive you. I think I forgave you a long time ago. I just haven't gotten around to, verbalizing it in this way. So, I think the time could be for a return to acting. Of course, only if you chose to. The name Jake Lloyd is still recognizable. And if anything, now might be a good time for a comeback. I mean, hell, look at Neil Patrick Harris. Everyone sees him now as this, whatever you want to call him, Barney from How I Met Your Mother, as well as, Neil Patrick Harris playing himself as in the Harold and Kumar movies. Only see the first one for the record. That second one is ridiculous. And the third, that Christmas one, what the hell? Anyway, now might be a good time for a comeback. So just throwing all that out there. Take it as you will. And that's all I've got to say for right now. So until then, take care of yourselves. I'll catch you on the flip side.